And now I'd like to introduce our main speaker tonight, Serenity Sam from Hawthorne.
Good evening. I'm Sam, an alcoholic. And a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Getting rid of the toys. I have a mind full of toys. I don't really need that damn thing. I'll try to leave you with some hope tonight. It's been one of those years. I kissed an Al-Anon Thursday night and caught a cold. Maybe that's why I'm feeling depressed. That, and I've never particularly liked holidays, churchy holidays. I had some bad experiences along those lines when I was a child. I was sentenced to 8 years in a Catholic church and school, and I majored in guilt. And that was a tough thing for a rotten, obnoxious kid that I was. And I come from a family of alcoholics. Most of them drink. Those that don't should. I got into a lot of trouble when I was a kid, and that's why my mother sentenced me to the school for 8 years. And I don't know how you people drank, but I did a lot of drinking, as much as I possibly could. I also used a lot of drugs. I liked amphetamines, because they'll keep you awake. And when everybody else passes out, you can roll them. Well, I was a lower companion. I just started at the bottom and laid there. I never went anyplace. I don't know anything about social drinking. I heard about that after I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was a pig from the very beginning. I just took it all because it might work. I also smoked a lot of non-habit-forming weed that I was addicted to. I've been known to stick a needle in my arm, and I just did it all. And why not? There wasn't any hope where I came from. I just laid around loaded all the time with a bunch of other alkies and dope fiends that we were co-signing each other's bullshit. And I drank as long as I possibly could, and then 2 years longer. I kept right on going. By the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I felt like I had a 14-foot arrow embedded in my back, had a note on it that said, "Fuck you." And it was signed God. Now, that's the way I drank and lived. Well, I didn't live. I existed. I learned the facts of life when I was very young, so I went through puberty in 20 minutes, but I had a rather prolonged adolescence. I'm still in it in some areas. I'm not one of these well-adjusted alcoholics. I've met a few. They're frightening. I'm not one of these tra-la-la alcoholics either, where everything's wonderful all the time. Just wonderful or marvelous. We got a little old lady up my neck of the woods that everything that happens is just marvelous today, just marvelous. Ask her how she is, and she'll say, "Oh, I'm in the middle of a miracle." And I think, oh, shit, I don't want to be in the middle of that. Anyway, I promised myself when I was a child I would never drink. However, I'm not in Alcoholics Anonymous by mistake. My family life was terrible when I was younger. I had to live to survive in fantasies, in books, in my mind, but not in reality. I couldn't handle reality. I hated it and detested it, especially what reality was coming my way. I spent almost every weekend when I was a child in the visiting rooms at penitentiaries, visiting relatives. I was institutionalized and didn't even know it. That's where they all went, all of them. Once in a while they'd go to a nut house, but they all drank. And I promised myself no way was I going to grow up and be like those idiots. However, by the time I was 25 years old, I'd overshot the field. Because I bumped into my Aunt Bessie one day on the street, and she said to me, "You are the grand finale of son of a bitches in this family." I thought I was a nice guy. I didn't know what the hell she was talking about, or I didn't want to know what she was talking about. I'm grateful that a lot of my story is hearsay, because I had to hear about it from other people, because I did not just... I never recall any social drinking. I just didn't hang around people that wanted to drink 2 beers and go home, or 2 whatevers and go home. No way. I just, from the very beginning, I was a mess. But I'm a very late starter. I was almost 21 years old before I started to drink. I held off as long as I could because I did not want to end up like my relatives. However, I did my 8-year stretch in the Catholic church and school. I went from there directly to a reform school where I did a year and something, because I was in the family business, stealing, and I got caught. When I was 16 years old, I was married. I was a father when I was 16, and I still hadn't had anything to drink. When I was 18 years old, I was arrested for 9 felonies. I was guilty of every one of them, and I knew I was going to do time, but it didn't seem to matter because I'd been in so damn many visiting rooms of penitentiaries anyway. When I got thrown in that 2-bit county jail to wait on a trial for all those felonies, my Uncle Bill was already in there doing 90 days for drunk and disorderly and knocking the hell out of my Aunt Gussie. She was next door in the women's jail doing 90 days for drunk and disorderly and trying to knife my Uncle Louis. And they throw me in there, and I had to wait 20-some days on a trial, and the first visiting day we had, my father came to see us, and he was drunk, so they arrested him in the visiting room and threw him in with us. So my life was one hell of a mess, and I hadn't had anything to drink yet. I can't blame everything on the bottle. I was the son of a bitch, and then I drank. Well, I did my time in the penitentiary. I got a 1 to 10 year sentence. I got out after almost 19 months, and because I was a model prisoner, I knew how to get by in jail. I knew what 1 day at a time was long before I got to AA. Anybody that's been in the joint knows that. When I got out, I was not quite 21, and I started to drink. I realized what a fool I was for not starting earlier, because I loved the bottle, and I loved what it did because it blotted out that terrible reality that I had to live in. And I loved it, what it did for me. The first year of my drinking, I started using drugs, and I never had any qualms about taking anything. I didn't care what they were. It might work. The way I felt about it, I was a guinea pig. Somebody once gave me a bunch of big yellow pills. He said they had a lot of opium in them. I said, "God damn, that's fine. Give me some more of those." And I found out later that he'd gotten them from a veterinarian. They were for horses. But I didn't care. See, that's the thing. I didn't give a damn. Like, go get some more of them. It bothered me where they came from. I liked them. And so that's the way I was for as long as I possibly could be. I never slowed down, stopped. I just changed to something else. When I was about 23, 24 years old, I ran into a mathematical genius, a pillhead like myself, of course. All pillheads are geniuses, or intellectuals. He was a bookkeeper in a factory in this small town where I lived. I was still on parole. And he figured out how to fill out income tax forms and get money back, and I did not work in the factory. And the check arrived, and we cashed it and split it. Did that for 3 years. The third check arrived. 2 weeks later, the police arrived. And I had used my father's name, so they arrested my father for it. And my father was drunk all the time. He thought he'd done it, so it was no big deal. So my father went into federal court, and he pled guilty, and they put him away. While he was in the federal penitentiary, he discovered Alcoholics Anonymous, and he sobered up. And the old bastard never took another drink the rest of his life. However, he never knew that I 12-stepped him. That's an amend I held off making as long as I could. I was about 2 years sober, and I decided to make the amend, and I went to see him, and I thought it was just wonderful. Here we were, father and son, both members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're going to a meeting, and I'm going to make these wonderful amends to him. And as we were going out the door, he picked up a pistol off a table there and stuck it down in his belt, and I said, "What the hell kind of meeting are we going to? You afraid somebody's going to steal your big book?" Papa had no sense of humor. He hit me right in the mouth and knocked me down. And he said, "That's the way I release, you son of a bitch." And I thought, uh-oh, I got to make that amend. And then I realized that the step says, "Except when to do so would injure them or others." And I'm others. So I held off making that amend, and fortunately a few years ago he died. So I've got that pressure off of me. I finally got off parole and I left town, and I moved to a town where the police were paid off, and if you wanted drugs, especially marijuana or pills, all you had to do was walk into the liquor store and buy it. And the liquor stores were open 24 hours a day. And goddamn, I liked that. And I was in a couple of wrecks while I was there. I didn't even have a driver's license. Hit a car head on, but because the police were paid off, why, they sent me home in a cab. And I thought I'd found it. I'd always dreamed about. But there was a lot of trouble there. See, a lot of these people carried guns and knives and things like that, same as my family. I guess that's why I got along with them. And I was a witness to a killing. And I wanted to be an alive witness. And all I knew was when in doubt, cut out, and when in doubt, drink. And so that's what I did. And I went home to Mama, because I have a 500-mile-long umbilical cord. And when I got there, Mama had been to Al-Anon. Yes. She had those little beady eyes and that smile they get. She got me up against the wall and released me. Learned a few things from the old man. And she told me that I could stay there about 10 days and then I had to get my ass out of there. And I got to tell you, at that time I was at the end of the road. I couldn't go any further. I just didn't know what I could do. I'd been depressed for several years. I'd always kind of hung around depressed type people. My Aunt Bessie, that taught me the facts of life, was a very depressive type person. She loved it when it rained. And she could cry and sing maudlin tunes. She always had a lot of records by singers that leave you with no hope. And when I was about 8 years old, she taught me the secret of life, she called it. She gathered my sisters and me together one evening and said, "This is the secret of life, and don't you ever forget it." She said, "It's this. You fall out of the womb and you crawl across hostile territory towards a grave, and that's it." And I believed her. And life turned out kind of like that for me. Always in hostile territory. And so I stayed with Mama for about 10 days. That's all she would allow. And I moved to Venice, California. But before I left the East, while I was at my mother's, my youngest brother came running from the police and others. And one morning he and I were puking together. And he said to me, "If our luck holds out, we'll be dead by noon." So I've got it down to a little more narrow than one day at a time. It was just a few minutes at a time. Anyway, I moved to Venice, and I lived there for 2 more years. I moved in to a lower companion apartment building that was full of other lower companions and suicidals like myself. There was a girl next door to me that we became friends, and she was a suicidal. She would come home every night from work, brush her teeth, turn on the gas, and go to bed. That's my kind of people. I lived in that building for 2 years. The landlord there was just crazier than hell. He didn't drink. He was the only one there that didn't. Everybody else did. But he was crazy because he planted a mop in the side yard. And he'd water that mop every day. Since everybody in the building was loaded, we kept looking at it, wondering if it was going to grow. Now, that's how dingy I was by that time in my life. I couldn't hardly move anymore. I had to live close to the source of supply, and one of the reasons I moved from the liquor store. And we went out there in the middle of the night and painted our own crosswalk from the entrance of the apartment building over the liquor store. Too damn far to the corner. And after living in there for just about 2 years, I called my father at Christmas time, which was the only time he would accept a collect call from me, and he suggested that I go to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I said to him, "What for? I'm not going over there with those goddamn old fools. I know what you do at those meetings. You sit around and sing the AA hymns, and you pick at liquor stores and pass out literature on street corners." Because what I'd heard about Alcoholics Anonymous had been from people who were sentenced to AA by their wife or a judge, and they were sitting in bars complaining about it, of course. I always met a lot of intellectuals in bars. For some reason or other, I paid attention to him. I thought, I'll try it. Why not? And he doesn't have to know that. I didn't admit anything to him. I just thought, well, I'll do it. And it took me 2 days to quit taking everything, quit drinking. I kind of tapered off, quit second day. And the third day, I went into Los Angeles to find Alcoholics Anonymous. And it took me till almost 10 o'clock that night to find a meeting. I walked into the meeting. It was almost 10 o'clock. It was about over, and there was a woman sharing, and she said that she'd wet her pants twice, and she came to AA. And I thought, God damn, wait till they find out what I've done. I went to a meeting the next night, and there was the man sharing about he'd gotten a horse the year before that for Christmas. His mother had given him the horse, and it cost $10,000, and he kept getting drunk and falling off the horse, so he came to AA. And I thought, what am I doing here? But I heard about lower companions, but I didn't see any. And they didn't talk about dope. They didn't talk about pills of any kind. They didn't talk about marijuana, so I didn't talk about it. I admitted that I had a slight problem with the bottle. That's all I would admit to with that bunch. They were a rather serious group. Should have had a sign up on the wall, heavy does it. Like that. The average age of the group was deceased. At the end of 10 days, I stayed sober and clean for 10 days. I smoked some marijuana. And I got thirsty, so I drank. Then I got drowsy, so I took some pills. And that lasted a week. And I remembered about lower companions, and so I cleaned up again, and I walked right back into where I'd been to some meetings, and I said to a guy, "Where the hell's a lower companion meeting?" And he said, "Come on, I have just the group for you." And he took me over to the corner of Pico and Alvarado in Los Angeles, and there was a group there called the End of the Line. And it was the end of the line. There was some sick mothers in there. At the beginning of the meeting, the leader pounded the gavel, and he says, well, there ain't no traditions here. It's every man for himself. So they didn't bother to read those damn things. They did read part of chapter 5, And then they asked for announcements, and a man stood up and said that he was sinking into a depression, and he said that he was going to kill himself that week, and he wouldn't be at the meeting the following week, so he wanted to say goodbye to all of his friends. And he gave me a measure of hope, because that was a step up from where I was coming from. Because I was like my Aunt Bessie. I always carried 3 suicide notes and a razor blade for emergencies. And here was a couple of people talking about things that I could kind of understand and relate to. A few minutes into the meeting, through the side door came 3 dykes, 2 sober, 1 drunk. As they came through the door, the drunken one dropped her purse, out fell a gun, a bottle, and a dildo. The 2 sober ones got to fighting over the contents of the purse. The leader made them take the fight outside. They left the drinking one in there, and she sobered up, and she is still sober today. And she says that she's sober because she was made welcome at that group. Well, I happen to believe that should say it for any group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Otherwise, I hope the goddamn we care sign falls on your head. Everybody should be welcome here. The girl was pretty upfront about things. She's about 6'2" and had a flat-top haircut. And she introduced herself and said, "Hi, I'm Aggie the Dyke." And, now, Aggie and I are still friends today, and I value that friendship, but I value the continuity of that friendship. She's a very strong lady, but she's one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life. She's great on 12-step call. She just falls right in there and gives out love right away, and something seems to happen. And that's one of the major reasons I'm still sober today. I still do that. I still make 12-step calls on wet ones. I don't care whether they're wet or not or what the hell they are. And yet I went through a period in Alcoholics Anonymous where I didn't do that. I became an AA guru. We're all self-appointed. But after I'd been sober a couple of years, I was very glib and articulate, and I began to make a lot of money in a wonderful industry up north, and I stood around by the coffee pot with my expensive clothes and looked good. And I didn't hold out my hands to newcomers anymore. They came to me. And so I quit working with wet ones and with new ones, and all I did was spout a lot of wonderful cliches. I paid a hell of a price for that. But to get up to that point from coming out of the gutter, and I know what 4-point restraints are, to cinch I know what jails are, and I was nothing but a big shit magnet for the cops when I was drinking. I couldn't get from one bar to the other if they were next door to each other without getting rousted. I thought my name was Get in the Car, punk. Every night. Here they were. Kicked me out in the morning. The first sponsor that I picked in Alcoholics Anonymous was a man that I used to drink with, and I figured, well, there's part of my 4th and 5th step right there. He knows some of it because I used to drink with him. And George had a rather liberal program. I was sober about 10 days or 2 weeks, and George and I were on our way to a meeting, and we stopped to get something to eat, and George ordered a ham sandwich and a bottle of beer. I said, "George, I think that's a no-no." George says to me, "Beer is a beverage, punk." All right, that's what you believe. I took my ham sandwich, went out the door, and went on to the meeting. George didn't bother with the meeting. He kept on drinking. Within a few months, he had 3 more drunk driving charges to add to his list. And he did over a year in jail, and he never did sober up. And a few years after that, he was shot and killed by a bus driver in Santa Monica. And you have to really antagonize a bus driver a lot to be shot through the heart. But George managed that. And so much for beer is a beverage, punk. It's a good epitaph. I picked another sponsor, and this one I picked because I was certain that I could manipulate him. he had a certain serenity about him that I wanted, but I thought he was just dumber in hell, too. And I thought, well, he must have this thing really simple because he couldn't understand anything that's complicated, because the first day I met him, he said, "Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous." And I saw him the next day, and he says, "How's your sobriety?" But I heard him say in a meeting, he said, "I am sober today, and I'm not unhappy about it." And that was my problem. Every time I was sober, I hated it. So I wanted to find out how he did that. And I followed him around, and I asked him to be my sponsor. And what I didn't know was that he had bullshit filters in his ears, and he could translate my bullshit. Because God knows I had enough of it, enough for several people. Schizophrenia is a mild word for what I was when I got here. I could have posed for a group picture by myself. I was a lot of people. Right in mid-sentence, I could switch a role to somebody else. I put him to the test a lot of times. First meeting I went to, they gave me a meeting directory, and at the back of the meeting directory were some blank pages, and a lot of people put their phone numbers on there and said to me, "If you have an urge to take a drink, I want you to call me before you take the drink. I don't care if it's 4 o'clock in the morning." So I set my alarm and got up and found out if they meant it. Then after I'd been sober a few months, some of my bullshit intellectualism returned, and I began to outgrow my sponsor rather rapidly, although he still would get to me because every time I would ask him a question, why, he would translate the bullshit out of it and tell me the truth. He could usually do it with one line or even sometimes one word. For instance, after I'd been here a while, I looked at those cliches that we have up on the walls at some meetings, and I said, "What the hell is all that crap anyway? What does live and let live mean?" He said, "It means mind your own goddamn business." See, he could always translate for me. I asked him about think. He said, "In your case, it's with what, so forget it." Then we get into some kind of an argument because he liked to read out of that book to me, and I didn't want to hear anything out of that damn book because they kept demanding rigorous honesty in there in Chapter 5. And finally I'd get into it with him, and I'd say, "You old wet-brained bastard, just shut up. Let me alone." He would say to me, "Did you hear that noise?" I'd say, "What noise?" He'd say, "I heard your mind close." So the old wet-brained bastard saved my life by telling me the truth. And he showed me by example. I was sober for several weeks, and I went crazy. I found myself at 2:30 a.m. in a phone booth on the corner of Wilshire and La Brea. I lived in Venice, which is a long ways from there, and I wasn't quite sure how I got in the phone booth or how I was going to get out or what I was going to do, and I called him, 2:30 a.m. He asked me where I was. I told him. He said, "You stay right there. I will be there in 20 minutes." And he was. And he saved my life by putting his actions where his mouth was. And I had never found that sort of thing in my life. I've been a lot of places, but never like in Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I went to that Catholic church in school, they laid a lot of things on me that Jesus loves you and God loves you and blah, blah, blah. And they will take care of you. And on the way home from there, my sisters and I were eating out of garbage cans, so naturally we didn't believe anything they said. They didn't put their actions where their mouth was. We told them we were hungry. Nobody seemed to believe us or care. So I lived one hell of a life when I was a kid. My father was put in the penitentiary for child beating. That's the tip of the iceberg. And a lot of other things happened to me that I used to play on people's sympathy. After I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I used to talk in half-truths. I would tell sometimes in a meeting how I was molested when I was a child. And the truth of that is, it was the paper boy. He copped a feel, and I neglected to say that I liked it, and I was out there the very next Saturday looking for him. All I would say was, "Oh, yes, you know, I was molested when I was a child." Those half-truths almost killed me, of course. I had to get rid of all that. After I'd been sober for a couple of years, and I was still into 12-step calls then, I was such an AA fanatic by that time that I carried a big book under one arm and a Bible under the other arm. When I went to meetings, I emptied the hall a few nights with that. But I was such a fanatic that there was my sponsor and a man that was the manager of a club that I belonged to got together with a little conspiracy as to how to take care of me, because I got to the 8:30 meeting at 6 o'clock and molested newcomers all over the place, and they would send me out on fake 12-step calls to get rid of me. Being an AA fanatic, of course, I went, and I brought people back. They were a little reluctant, but that didn't bother me. Drug them into meetings, and some of them sobered up, and they're still sober today, and they don't know that they're in AA by mistake. That proved to me it doesn't matter who makes the call. Get those bodies to meetings. Something seems to happen here, because at that time in my life I thought I had the answers. And I was so spiritually strong I could knock an Al-Anon down at 20 feet with my vibes. If I shook hands with a newcomer, their whole right side sobered up. I did everything but move to Laguna Beach. I hear they have whole groups that walk on the water over there. After I'd been sober a couple of more years, I fell into a line of business where I made a lot of money, and I used to tell my sponsor, you have to have something to flaunt to the newcomer. So I bought myself a Cadillac convertible, and I would pull that up in front of a Venice AA meeting, right in front of the door where you had to go over it, under it, or through it to get into the meeting. Let you know whose Cadillac that was. And the first night I did that, I walked into the hall, and there's my sponsor talking to a newcomer, and I blabbed about getting this car. The newcomer says to my sponsor, what kind of a car did Sam get? My sponsor says, he got a green one. I said, it's a Cadillac convertible, you old fool. He says, come here, Bodine. Said, there's only two kinds of cars, those that run and those that don't run. Have you got that? I saluted. I knew enough to do that because I was afraid of that any more of the truth. I had to break away from him, of course, because I'd outgrown him. And I got back into half-truths again in a lot of areas. And I was very successful in my work. And I, of course, had to brag a lot about that and use the old half-truths. I didn't tell people how I got some of the jobs I got. I'm not trying to let on that I slept my way to stardom. It wasn't that. But I just seemed to trip over things. I just fall right into some kind of a job. The very first full-time job I ever got in Alcoholics Anonymous, I tripped over the damn thing. A guy had set up a thing for me to get a job as a dishwasher, and he told me to go up to this place, and I was on the bus, and I went right by it. I got to the end of the bus line, I had to get off. So I got off, and across the street's a record store. So I walked in there, and the guy says, are you here about the job? And I said, yes. What do I have to do? And he hired me. I worked for him 2.5 years. I just tripped over things like that. Later on, when I was writing for a living, I fell into some wonderful jobs there, too, but I would just stand around and pose as a human being in meetings and look good at all costs. You see, I was going to meetings and I was doing little more than bumping my facade into other facades. I had ceased to communicate except on a limited, conditional basis. And I paid a price for that, a hell of a price. Some of the jobs I got, I held them by my talent, of course, but I just tripped over. One of them, for instance, was the creator of Hogan's Heroes. Is a man named Bernie Fine. He called me to come in for an interview for a job, and I thought it was a 12-step call. I said, have you been drinking? That's my opening line to him. I tried to get him to take the 20 questions on the phone. I tried to get him to a meeting that night. He don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but he's laughing. And we finally got it straightened out, and I went in 2 days later and got the job. And I worked for him for almost 2 years, but I didn't tell people that. That's what I'm saying. When I was newly sober, all I wanted to talk about was the armed robberies, the burglaries. I didn't want to talk about the fact that the last 2 years of my drinking, I couldn't tie my shoes. I always would tell myself, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. God damn it, I'll try it when nobody's looking. And nobody was looking. There wasn't anybody around by that time. I had to have every light in the house on 24 hours a day. I had to live in places where you can look out a window to see who's knocking at the door. But I didn't tell people that. I wanted to talk about the mechanics of what had gotten me here. And so sooner or later, I had to get down to the emotions and what was really bothering me, the fact that I had never loved one other human being in my life. I am one selfish son of a bitch. I was also one fear-ridden person. I was afraid, scared to death that I had to stand upright and breathe, let alone love anybody. And so all I had ever been was just in heat, and that was that. It was never love. I didn't know what it was, and what I had seen of it in other people, I didn't want anything to do with it because you got hurt. And I was never going to be vulnerable again in my life. I was going to have control over everything now that I was sober by God, and like that. And Jesus, I paid a price for that. I sank into a depression a few years after that, and that depression lasted for a long time, and I didn't want to talk to people about it, especially newcomers. I didn't want them to think there was something wrong with my program, because by this time, of course, I'm a guru, and but I would walk out of meetings and literally fall apart. I'd start crying, and I couldn't stop. And I was writing comedy for a living, and it's hard to do that with the 3 suicide notes and the razor blade in my pocket again. I left the meeting one night, and I promised myself I was going to do it after I got home, and I left the car running in the garage. I went in the house and left the 3 suicide notes there, did the dishes, went back out and laid down in the back seat of the car, discovered I had to go to the can. I'm not going to be found with wet pants. I got up, I went back in the house. While I'm in there, the phone rang. And I'm nosy on my deathbed, so I answered the phone. And it was a newcomer in a depression. And this nerd was interrupting my suicide attempt. But being sober for a long time and a guru, I didn't want him to think that there was anything wrong with my program, so I had to tell him how wonderful I felt. I had to interrupt the conversation and say, just a moment, I have to go out and turn off the car. He thought I was such a fanatic that I'd leaped in the house when I'd heard the phone. I have to talk about that. I don't hide anything today. I'm sober and alive today because I don't hide a damn thing. I have no secrets. You want to know something? Ask me. I will give you a direct answer if you have a direct question. It's as simple as that for me. It's taken a hell of a load off of me, but I had to learn that after many years of sobriety because I am one stubborn individual, and I had to get back into those steps again. And I went back to step 1 and started over, and I hadn't had anything to drink, I hadn't taken any pills, and I hadn't smoked any weed. But I went back to step 1, and I began to do some of the simple things that I had done in the beginning. I went up to the central office in Los Angeles, and I began to answer the phone 2 shifts a week, very anonymously, keeping my name out of it. Anybody that I work with today, I have one rule: never mention my name in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous under any circumstances. Keep the damn personalities out of it. We got enough of those up in Los Angeles. I don't know how it is down here, but we got them up there. Huge meetings of clones. They're all nodding their head at the same time. God, I feel like I'm in the lobby of the Biltmore when I'm around these people. It's creepy. Because I'm a firm believer in the freedom of the individual to be yourself, whatever that is, or selves if you're schizophrenic. Bring them all here. I didn't mind being several selves for a long time. My sponsor says, you better get them integrated, otherwise you're going to have to work the steps for each one of them. I wasn't up to that, so... Now, I believe that when sobriety is imposed on somebody or structured or anything like that, that it's doomed. And I firmly believe it has to be a free type thing. Aim for it. Go get it. Use it. Do it yourself. You can have the best sponsors in the world. Doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything. That's been my hard-ass experience. Tonight I'm sharing my experience, strength, and scar tissue with you. You can get your own hope. And there's plenty of it around. And I don't want somebody else's, and I'm not trying to get ahead of anybody else, because I don't want to lose the place in line that I have. And my beliefs today are much simpler than they used to be. I'm not that prisoner of a world that doesn't exist anymore because I was trapped in the past. I was always the good old days, always the good old days. 20 minutes after I was born, I was longing for the good old days. It was always better someplace else. I told my mother if I had had a light and something to read, I never would have come out of the womb. My Aunt Bessie said the only reason you did is because you'd written on all the walls. I was a rotten kid. Give me a pen or a crayon or something and watch out. If it's a blank space, I got it. As I learned to write those wonderful words when I was 5 years old, my Aunt Bessie would give me a quarter if I'd say fuck in the grocery store and embarrass my mother. So I soon enough learned how to spell it, and I'm writing it up on the wall. So you see, today if I don't continue to work those steps, I diminish my life. I diminish my sobriety. And I can't afford to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to live life to the fullest. And by God, I do. I experience, I feel, I do things. Yes, there's some pain. If you find somebody that's got tra-la-la sobriety, follow them around. I don't know what the hell they do, but I can't live like that. Some days it's like this, and up yours, and anybody else that gets in my way. I get on the freeway, and it's 500 Al-Anons, and they're all coming at me. Jesus. You ever been released by a whole group of Al-Anons? I have. God, I was afraid to look in the mirror. Wouldn't be any reflection there. Well, I'm jealous of the Al-Anons. They drink and work the steps. We have to sober up and do it, and that's a mother some days. Please enjoy yourself here, you newer people, or you who have been here a long time and are still depressed about it. It doesn't have to be that way. Enjoy yourself. I have to generate my own enthusiasm. I don't get it from somebody else. Sometimes when I haven't got any, something will rub off on me, but damn little really does. Something seems to happen when I apply some action. I get up off my dead ass and go to a meeting. Something seems to happen on the way there or after I get there. Because I'm a lazy son of a bitch. I can spend a whole day trying to turn sloth into meditation. I can sit around and watch Slip-O-Vision for days. But something seems to happen when I get up and apply that action. I have to surrender on a regular basis. I just saw a big sign up the street here at some damn car thing. I had the biggest urge to run up there and steal that damn thing and hang it in my front yard because it says "We surrender" on it. Just cut the "we" off of there and put it up. Because a few years ago, some friends of mine, I'm rather outspoken if you haven't figured that out by now, do a few outlandish things sometimes, by somebody else's terms, not mine. Anyway, there's a tunnel underneath LAX, and in that tunnel, a bunch of friends of mine and I went in there and we spray painted up on the walls, "Work the steps or die." And it was up there for 3 years. We never took that damn thing down. And every time anybody went underneath there going to a meeting someplace, because there was a club right south of there, about 20 blocks south of there, they'd see that damn thing. And I need reminders like that. I still need to go to meetings. I still need Chapter 5. And I like to... This is where I practice living in the here and now. I listen to it. There was a couple of Freudian mistakes in the thing tonight. I like that sort of thing. Christ, I've been to some wild meetings where people... I went to a Thorazine group a few years ago, and there was... They asked one of the inmates there to get up and read Chapter 5. It took him 25 minutes to do it. I'm really going to go to sleep tonight with this one. And he got to the part where it says, "We are not saints," and he read it, "We are now saints." And he stopped and he looked around and he said, "Isn't that wonderful?" If I hadn't been there, I would have missed that. I want to be there when things happen, not just hear about it later on. And so that's why I live in the here and now. It's so much more fun than hearing about things, is being there and participating. If you have binoculars, put them down. Join us on the murky road of happy destiny. Yeah, the book says Road of Happy Destiny, but that sucker is murky on a lot of days for me. And I not only trudge, I lurch along the murky road a lot of times. It gets so bad I need a seeing eye newcomer to get to meetings. Well, today, I risk being foolish. That's obvious. I got up here tonight. I take that chance, and why not? I'm with my fellow human beings, my fellow alcoholics, and I still see my friends that I've known for a lot of years. I like that. All my life I wanted family, and not my family, somebody else's. I still don't get along with them. They're still crazier than hell. The family reunions, they start at 9 or 10 o'clock, and the sheriff's there by 11. Nothing has changed. Every time I haven't been to one for years, but the last couple of times I went, my Uncle Frank says to me, "When did you get out of the Army?" I've never been in the Army. I have 2 great-grandchildren. I'm a little old for that. I won't live like that. No way. Sometime after I sobered up, a friend of mine lived here in San Diego, and I came down here to see him, and he was still loaded. And I got here, and he said, "What are you doing here today?" And I said, "Well, this is the day I said I would be here." He said, "No, it isn't. I wrote it down on the calendar." We went in and looked at the calendar. The calendar was 2 years old. I don't want to live like that anymore. When I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had a watch, and it only had a minute hand on it. And because I couldn't sell it or hock it, but I kept it, and I wound the damn thing. And anyway, somebody would ask me what time it is, and I'd say it's 1/4 something. But the people I drank with didn't care. And today I want to know what time it is and what day it is. And if I don't know, I ask. Or look at the calendar or whatever. So I live in the here and now. I surrender to this power, whatever the hell it is. And I surrender every day. My prayers consist of one word: help. If any kind of a higher power, he knows what the hell I need. And I keep it very simple. As I learned a long time ago from a writer named H.L. Mencken. He died about 27 years ago. His will consisted of one sentence: being of sound mind, I spent it. And that's exactly what I do. I ain't leaving nothing for nobody except the good times we had together, and that's it. I equate that not only with the material, but with my time that I have to spend on this planet. I spend it. I use it. Instead of waiting for the right time. If you're wondering when the right time to work the steps is, it's now. Don't worry about overshooting the field, having your image in a stained glass window in a club up the street here someplace. Not too likely. Although there are some who live in hopes of that, I'm sure. There's 2 up my neck of the woods that are waiting for a vacancy in the Trinity. I have a lot more vicious, inaccurate statements to make, but fortunately time has run out. I talked to my friend Aggie the Dyke today, and I asked her to come along tonight, but she had 2 newcomers she was taking to a meeting. And my God, I value that friendship, and others, so many others that I've known for a lot of years. A few years ago, Aggie and I went to a meeting in Brentwood, which ain't the place to take Aggie. But we went there on our motorcycles. I still ride a motorcycle, too, and we walked in and sat down, and Aggie got up to go get us some coffee, and the guy next to me says, "Good God, who is that?" And I said, "Well, that's my friend Aggie the Dyke." And he said, "Jesus, I bet she could kickstart a 747. But the meeting started, and they asked for newcomers, and here's a bunch of newcomers there. And Aggie went over and grabbed one at the coffee break. And this poor guy didn't have a way home, and he's on crutches, for Christ's sakes. And here he is on the back of Aggie's motorcycle with his crutches strapped. And off they go. My God, half the group applauded. It's great to watch it. But she does things like that. And a lot of people in Alcoholics Anonymous do. That's the secret of it, really, is giving it away, is passing it on. I used to worship my sponsor. You know, I was doing this, a number on him. And he said to me, "Dummy, you're facing the wrong direction. Turn around. Pass it on." See, that's the title of the new book by Mr. Wilson. And I need to hear that on a repeated basis, to pass it on, because I like to keep it. I got to hoard it, you know. I may need it some night. And our book says we have to give away the entire supply. And by God, that's what I do. I've learned not to argue with that book. I try to do what it says, and on some days I get it done. And you know, we're very lucky to be in this room. And please notice and feel the laughter that's in this room tonight. They were honest emotions for me, was what happened here tonight. It's a we type of thing, the communication that's here. It has to be that way. Fortunately, because if one individual had it, he would be selling it. You know that. We'd have to go over there and pay out the money to get the damn thing. But it's a giveaway. That's why it works. Otherwise, look at all these places they advertise on television. You know, CompCare may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. And you end up with a $9,000 big book. When you could come here and get it for a lot less or steal it even. Hell, I wouldn't care. I can tell you tonight that my name is Sam and I'm for real, but only as long as I continue to be an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Those of us that are here in this room, and I know some of you aren't, and that's all right, but those of us that are here are the luckiest people in the world, and we can maintain that luck, nurture it, and keep it going by being active members of Alcoholics Anonymous. If I sound like an AA fanatic or a pimp for AA, I'll just have to sound like that. But I don't know of any place else to go that works quite the way this does, and with a degree of being comfortable and at peace with yourself, and you don't have to run from anybody. I've lived in the same apartment for almost 10 years, and I like the continuity of that. I've had fights with my neighbors, but I've stood up for what I believe. They had a dog that barked 28 hours a day, and they wouldn't pay any attention to me. They prayed for me. They're Jesus freaks. So I lobbed an M80 at them, and it's a big firecracker. I got his attention. I immediately became his higher power. And now when I do this, he goes in the house. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted to get his attention. But they called the cops on me. And I'm a spiritual giant, and they don't know that. And so I had to stand there and face that. The cops came to the door, and am I going to run? Am I going to lie? What the hell am I going to do? I had a piece of luck. Louise, my roomie, snitched me off. She says, "Oh, yeah, he did it." So the cop asked me how old I was, and before I could finish or even tell him, he says, "Look, I understand what happened," and he turned around and walked away. Simple as that. But I had to stand there and take whatever was coming. See, I take the responsibility for my actions, because I'm sick to death of running. There's lots of ways to run, so hang in there. Let's have some fun along the way. If people don't know how to stir shit, see me after the meeting. I'll teach you how right out here in the parking lot. You don't know how to do it. I'm a firm believer in that. Learn how to do this, damn it. Come on, I came here, I did a lot of self-imposed penance. You know, Doc Smith, one of the co-founders, said in an article in the Grapevine a bunch of years ago that most alcoholics come to Alcoholics Anonymous with a very heavy burden of unearned guilt. I'd hit you in the head and take your guilt away from you because I could handle it. God damn it, I'm strong. Waste of time. I don't believe in guilt anymore. But I do take the responsibility for my actions, and this gives me so much freedom to be myself. How lucky we are to be in this room tonight and to be enjoying life. If you've had a rough day, okay, have a rough day, but lean into the pain and get out of it and come on in here and let's have some fun as we all lurch along the murky road of happy destiny together. That's it. All right.